Not yet. But are we live?
Are we already live?
We are live now.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the EPP Data Summit of today. I would like to welcome you in the name of the EPP Group, the biggest group in the European Parliament, and in the name of the three coordinators of the relevant committees in the Parliament. It's Axel Voss from the URI Committee, it's Andreas Schwab from the IMCO Committee, it's Pablo Echeverria, also from the IMCO Committee, and last but not least, Angelika Niebler, the rapporteur for the data regulation. We would like specifically to welcome our distinguished guests from overseas. I might start for protocol reasons for this time with our American friends. A warm welcome to Christopher Hoff. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Services of the US Department of Commerce, and as we had been told, one of the appointments of the new Biden administration on transatlantic relations and data. And I would like to highlight his heroic effort to join this meeting because it must be something like 6 o'clock in the morning. And we see that as a substantial contribution to the transatlantic relations. A warm welcome to Thierry Breton, the European Commissioner for the digital. He had been presenting a robust package of legislative proposals, the Data Governance Act, the Digital Service Act, the Digital Markets Act, and some forthcoming data acts. So that's actually what we are talking about. EPP's DNA is very much related to the transatlantic relations. So that's the reason why we specifically wanted to include already our American counterparts, be it later on in Congress or right now with the new administration, into something which might have been reflected if we would have a TTIP as a kind of regulatory coordination or regulatory exchange mechanism. Since we don't have a TTIP, which we still want to exercise this practice and contribute to the now much better relations between the new administration and the EU. Specifically, I would like to welcome also Olivier Siegel. He's chairman of the think tank Digital New Deal. Thierry and Christophe will do the first panel, the setting of the global stage on data. It will be moderated by Angelika Niebler. There's a second panel, creating the framework. I warmly welcome Catherine Dow, board member by My Data Global, Dr. Magdalena Pich, the head of the regulatory affairs at Allegro, Evelyn Metzen, head of government affairs and public policy of Google, and Francisco Montalvo, the chief data officer of Telefonica. This panel will be moderated by my distinguished colleague, Axel Voss. The third one and the last one is the Making Data Work panel. There I would like to welcome Dr. Amandeep Gill, CEO and Project Director of International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative, Lars Malou, co-founder and CTO of Corti, Ana Garcia Robles, the Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association, and Professor Dr. Isabel Welpe, the Academic Director of the Center of Digital Technology and Management of the Technical University of Munich. A warm welcome to her. My son is studying at the TU, so I have to be polite. Ladies and gentlemen, usually intellectually we share an introduction between the ITRE committee and the IMCO committee, but this time we're in a serving position, so I leave the introductory words in terms of the issue to my colleague Andreas Schwab. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christian, for your excellent introduction. And it has been a big pleasure to work together with you on preparing that conference that we are doing today. Normally, I have to say to our colleague from the US, Mr. Hoff, normally we would do that in the European Parliament in sort of a breakfast, of a parliamentary breakfast. And I am always reminded of Oscar Wilde saying that only deaf people are good at breakfast. So we have skipped the breakfast today. and we do it for lunch. And therefore, we are very happy to have all the participants that Christian has welcomed. I don't want to spend too much time because we have so many brilliant colleagues from the EPP Group and academics and speakers that I just would like to kick off a bit by coming back to an article of The Economist from last year's edition in February, where it has said that the first paper is data more like oil or sunshine. And I think that's a very important question, because data is not something that we can compare to any other raw material that we have been seeing in the past, because that has all been replaceable. Data are the key element for the new economy, for the new digital economy, and therefore I think we want data to be available to all companies in the European Union, but even beyond. And that's the message that we want to give today already as EPP Group. And Christian has perfectly pointed it out, that we want to give that sunlight to all companies, also beyond Europe, in a fair manner. There should be no cloud in between the companies in one side of this world and the sunshine. It should be an access for every company. And to achieve this will be part of the legislative package that Commissioner Breton, who is with us, I'm very happy about that, has presented already. Our colleague Angelika is working on one of the most important pieces, the Data Governance Act. And therefore, we will have to see today what we have to do more to make data not only the new oil, but also some sort of sunshine to everybody. That's the aim of the EPP Group, and we are very happy to have you all here. And I'm looking forward to a very interesting conference. Thank you so much for attending this conference with all of us together.
Thank you, Andreas. And now I give the floor to Angelika Niebler.
Thank you very much, dear Christian and dear Andreas, for your excellent introductions. Well, I have the honor and pleasure now to moderate the first panel, which is titled Setting the Stage, Global Stage on Data. In this panel, actually, we will talk about the policy direction chosen in the European Union and in the United States towards data. We talk about how transatlantic cooperation on data could look like. And finally, I think it's important also to address the issue how this transatlantic cooperation is going to be placed in the broader geopolitical perspective. I'm more than happy that we have three really renowned speakers in this panel. Let me briefly introduce our three speakers. First of all, we are really happy that our European Commissioner for Internal Market, Thierry Breton, is with us this afternoon. I warmly welcome Christopher Hoff, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Services of the US Department of Commerce. And last but not least, I'm really happy that Olivier Siegel, Delegated Director Caisse des Dépôts and Chairman and Founder of the think tank Digital New Deal, which supports businesses and policymakers in shaping digitalization, is joining us for the first panel. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor now to our Commissioner Thierry Breton, please.
Well, thank you very much, Angelika, and thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon, dear Christian, dear Andreas, dear Angelika. Good morning, very early morning, dear Assistant Secretary Hoff, and bonjour, cher Olivier Siegel. Ladies and gentlemen, so I'm extremely happy. Thank you very much for inviting me today to your very important discussion today at the EPP Group. So of course we'll speak about data, which are extremely important, and you know that I put this at the heart of my actions as a commissioner in charge of internal market, but also of digital here in the Commission. Because of course data is at the center of the digital transformation of our economy and of our society. Data has become even an essential economic asset, and we all know that. It is a resource that needs to be exploited wisely, of course, and the use of data is also, let's say, a political and societal game changer. Over the last few digital technologies have transformed the economy and society, affecting, of course, all sectors of activity and also the daily lives of our citizens. And the ongoing crisis has shown, needless to say, the absolutely essential role played by data, notably in the field such as, of course, public health and also research. So our society is generating a huge wave of industrial and public data, and we are talking about, let's say, roughly 33 to 40 zettabytes of data produced in the world today, which is expected, of course, to increase, as you know, to a mind-blowing volume of 175 to 180 zettabytes by 2025. And of course, most of this data will be what we call here in the Commission and with the Parliament industrial data. We know that this is an extremely important focus. Today, also, 80% of this data are processed still in cloud and servers, and 20%, let's say, at the edge. And by 2025, it will be just the opposite. In other words, 20% of this 175 to 180 zettabyte will be stored and processed in data center and cloud, and 80% of this everywhere on a pervasive way, thanks to IoT deployment of 5G networks and so on and so on. So, of course, this is a huge change of paradigm. If the first wave was about personal data, waves that are now coming are about, of course, industrial data. And we should be of no doubt. The battle of industrial data has started. This is why, after only a few months in office, I have put forward in February 2020 a new data strategy, which we now digitally implement. Beyond the economic case, data will increasingly be at the center of, let's say, geopolitics and will feed strategic partnerships. We see all our partners, and I say that next to a representative to the US administration, position themselves to capture the benefit of this revolution, and this is, of course, absolutely normal. There is therefore no time to lose here in Europe to get organized. Europe has everything it takes to play in this new geopolitical, economic, and industrial reality, but we need to act fast and strong. We need to act in a double spirit, autonomy, and of course, partnership with our allies. The first of our allies is of course, the US. The transatlantic partnership is a cornerstone to structure our action on data, and I'm eager to start engaging with the new administration on this topic, because we are facing, obviously, the same challenges. And many of the solutions can and should be built only in partnership. The stronger Europe will be on data, the more credible a partner it will be for the US. So I see two lines of actions. First, create the right regulatory environment for Europe to strive in the new data economy. Second, invest in the right infrastructures and technology to ensure our digital sovereignty. On the regulatory environment, I want to establish a single market for data in an open but, of course, assertive Europe. A market where our European industry, and especially our SMEs, would be in control of their own data they produce and fully benefit from its use and reuse. This doesn't mean, of course, that we should close the door to our partners and allies or to the rest of the world. It simply means to put in place in a transparent way, a stable and predictable environment for any economic actors willing to operate in our single market. As a first step, we presented at the end of last year a Data Governance Act, which allows to frame three main elements. First, unlock the reuse of public data, including highly sensitive public data, of course, which are today not available, and define the condition for their reuse. Second, to create a framework for European data platforms to emerge, we call it data brokers, that place individuals and companies in control of their data. And third, enable data altruism to foster sharing of data for public goods. The second step is what we did in the DSA and the DMA that Christian mentioned in his remark to frame the activity of the platforms and gatekeepers, of course, including on data. Additionally, in order to improve access to and use of industrial data, we are working on a Data Act to be adopted this year. And the objective will be to address the question of the valuation of data along the industrial value chain by clarifying data usage rights in business to business and business to government setting. One word, if you allow me, on infrastructure and technologies, because besides the regulatory aspect, we need to work on the infrastructures and the technologies in order to be concretely moving towards strengthening digital sovereignty. Concretely, we are promoting four main areas of investment. First, in connectivity, we must make Europe the most connected continent, and this will require a blending of technologies. Of course, fiber, we are very strong in fibers, where we want to continue to enhance our position in fibers, space-based connectivity, and of course, 5G and 6G. 5G will be, of course, a game changer. We all know that in all the industrial applications it will enable, including with the edge applications that I mentioned earlier. But as a highly sensitive networks, it should be highly secured. And with our 5G cybersecurity toolbox, we now have the possibility to exclude quote-unquote high-risk suppliers from the sensitive part of the network, the core and the RAN. And we are very much on the same line, I think, with the strategy pushed by the US administration. Second, in computing capacity, this will be absolutely critical for our capacity to analyze big amount of data. No artificial intelligence without computing power, of course. And that's why without this capacity, we will not be able to benefit from the upcoming industrial data wave. In this technological race, Europe has world-class suppliers. Our objective is to invest into, by the way, 3 supercomputers, pre-exascale and exascales, which are in the top 5 worldwide. And we are preparing, of course, the future with now 7 billion euros in total dedicated to reaching the next frontier, including with quantum computing. Third, in secure cloud, Europe must be able to store and process industrial data for itself. This is a critical element of our strategy. We are preparing an industrial alliance on industrial data, edge and cloud in order to develop and deploy the most advanced data processing capacity from cloud to edge. And fourth, and maybe the most important as it conditions all the others, is the design and production of powerful and sustainable processors. Processors are indeed a key strategic component, which are in all the connected objects, from cars to supercomputer, of course, to AI technologies, and also to the defense capabilities. And in this field, Europe should be able to reduce its dependencies, such as the one we can observe now on the automotive sector. We are preparing in this spirit a dedicated European Industrial Alliance on processor. On all of these, our ambitions are to decrease our dependencies. I note the executive order of President Biden, which insisted on initiated, as I'm sorry, a dependency review of specific sectors. We will present from our side our review as part of our industrial strategy at the end of this month. So in conclusion, data, of course, is the new, let's say, blood of the economy, the engine of industry of the future. Europe has all the assets to lead the global data race and work with It's link-minded partners, but we need, of course, to act with determination. And you can count on me both to push European ambition and to work with our US friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Thierry Breton. That was really, really very great, you know, how you outlined also the European approach towards driving through a data economy. Thank you so much for that, also for outlining the role data are playing in our societies, in economy. And if you allow me to cite you again, the battle of industrial data has started. I fully agree on that. So it was good to hear how our European plans are going to be. And this is also exactly the right movement forward to our next speaker, Christopher Hoff from the US administration. We are happy to have you on board and to get the US views on the data economy, and in particular learning how the US is going to further proceed in the data in the digital world. And well, let's talk about partnership, US European partnership as well. So please be so kind and take the floor, please, Mr. Hoff.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I am very happy to be here. It is a little bit early here, but I'm in Colorado. I'm looking at a beautiful snowy mountainside, so I can't complain too much. So thank you to the EPP and members of the Parliament for inviting me to speak today. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you to talk about the role of data in our economies and the importance of cooperation on data-related policy with partners like you. Restoring partnerships and alliances are Biden administration priorities. We're committed to working with allies and like-minded partners like the EU to establish high standard global rules to govern the digital economy and allow it to flourish in line with our shared democratic values. And at the US Department of Commerce, I'm responsible for international policymaking for the services industry. And one of the offices I oversee is the Office of Digital Services Industries, where my team promotes cross-border data flows that underpin international trade and economic growth for all US companies. And companies of all sizes and industries, not just tech giants, but SMEs, B2Bs, startups, companies in every single sector of the economy, they rely on the transfer of data across borders to innovate and compete in the global market. And some of these statistics the Commissioner just mentioned, so I won't reiterate all of them, but in the last year, data transfers have been estimated to contribute $2.8 trillion to global GDP, a share that exceeds the global trade in goods. And that share is expected to grow to 11 trillion by 2025. And technologies that depend on the free flow of data like 5G, the Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence promise to improve the well-being and health of citizens around the world. For example, data has equipped the healthcare industry with insights that help doctors identify heart deterioration earlier. And data has enormous impacts on patient lives by enabling the earlier detection of cancer. But these applications are dependent on access to large data sets, frequently involving patients across the world. And if companies can't aggregate data across trusted international borders, it will limit their ability to develop better applications that provide huge benefits to society. So this is a challenge facing both the United States and Europe. How do we enable the use of data for our societies while protecting the rights of citizens and promoting commerce and collaboration? And the European Commission has focused significant attention on these challenges, including the legislative proposals that we're talking about today. And the US supports Europe's goal to empower societies through data-driven innovation and create a single market for data. And we want to work with Europe on the shared challenge of bringing the benefit of the digital world to all of our citizens. Most of you know we're already working in partnership with the Commission to address challenges to transatlantic data flows. And beyond those immediate efforts to restore stability to transatlantic data flows, we're committed to intensifying our longer-term cooperation with the EU, working to promote interoperability among privacy regimes and enabling the transfer of data across borders with strong privacy protections, because data flows are fundamental to cooperation in the digital sector. Speaking of which, the US sees an opportunity here to build international consensus among democracies around core principles to promote trust and transparency in government access to personal data held by private firms and to advance pro-innovation policies. So let me turn quickly to discussing some of the initiatives that the US is working on to facilitate the free flow of data between countries while promoting privacy and security and economic growth. Privacy shield and transatlantic data flows in particular are top priorities for the Biden administration, for all of us here. The United States and the Commission, the European Commission together have intensified our negotiations on enhancing the EU-US Privacy Shield framework, but we need to walk and chew gum and maybe play chess at the same time, as my administration colleagues are keen on saying lately. So in that regard, we're also working with the Commission and the EU member states at the OECD on consensus around principles that reflect how national governments in democratic societies in practice obtain access to data while protecting privacy. So this is an important place for the US and Europe to demonstrate our shared values, sending strong signals to authoritarian states that would truly seek to undermine privacy and fundamental rights. And another thing that's important to the conversation is interoperability. The cross-border privacy rules, or CBPRs, which were developed in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, represent a key part of the US strategy to facilitate the free flow of data. The CBPRs offer a multilateral data privacy certification that facilitates interoperability across different privacy regimes with accountability and with enforcement. So initiatives like the CBPRs, the development of the Trusted Government Access Principles, and the negotiation for an enhanced privacy shield underscore our common commitment to privacy and data protection, as well as the rule of law, our mutual recognition of the importance of transatlantic data flows, and our common interests, because our differences are minuscule compared to the differences we have with authoritarian states. And working together is the best way to compete and protect data at the same time. So back to our relationship with one more statistic that Commissioner Breton mentioned already, which is that the US and European Union enjoy a $7.1 trillion economic relationship with $5.6 trillion in transatlantic trade annually. And we should focus on collaboration in the digital space as a means to enrich innovation and progress and bolster our strong transatlantic research relationship and promote technologies that improve health outcomes and meet global challenges like climate change and pandemics. We share a commitment to data protection and the responsible use of data, and that commitment is rooted in our core constitutional and fundamental values. So we look forward to continuing this work with you. These are issues of enormous importance, so thank you again for the opportunity to be here today to discuss them.
Thank you, Mr. Hoff, for joining us so early in the morning, and thanks for your excellent contribution, which is a good basis for further discussions now in this video conference. I'm so happy to learn from you that you pointed out the common values which we share. You mentioned the issue of privacy, which is key for us in the European Union. You know that very much. You know, the GDPR is what we are really keen on, and you're perfectly right. We have to work on a free flow of data, and we have to really ensure that access to large data sets are available, not only for the big tech companies, but also for SMEs. That is also very important. Thank you so much again for your really excellent contribution, and allow me now to directly move to our next speaker on the list. Again, I'd like to warmly welcome Mr. Olivier Siegel, and would kindly ask him for his contribution. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Angelica. 10 years ago, I was the CEO of a European startup named theguide.com, and we're providing shopping guides in 12 different European countries. So the name of the websites were Le Guide in France, but Ciao in Germany, or in Spain, or Trova Prezzi in Italy. And it was a data company. It was a price comparison engine, enabling consumers all over Europe to get data from the product, not only the price, but many data on the products. We're having 200 employees, growing extremely fast, out of which 100 engineers, all working in data, search engine, and IA. And the company was destroyed by Google. It was destroyed by Google. It was the case by Google Shopping, of which was the big case managed by Margaret Verstager. And it was a record fine of 2.4 billion, condemning Google for abuse of dominant position. The abuse of dominant position was extremely clear. It was providing Google Shopping on top of the list and demoting the rank of all its rivals. During that fight, that was a 7 years fight, had a continuous support of Andreas Schwab. And I want to say a great thank you to Andreas, and globally also to the group EPP, because probably in the DNA of this group, there is the will to support competition and a level field of competition or fair competition. And I want again to thank you that when you have to close different sites in Munich, in Berlin, also in London, to lay off engineers, some of them were recruited afterwards by hyperscalers from US companies. It's hard. And when you've got European deputies supporting you in that fight, it has a price. And I want to say a great thank you. I sold the company and I moved to another horizon, but I realized that we didn't have the right framework to win this battle of data. This is the reason why I found a think tank called Digital New Deal. And the goal of this think tank is really to defend more vigorously the data companies and the web companies in Europe against monopolies, and also to try to find a third way between the American ways and the Chinese way, and a better way. And in that fight, in the ideas we are promoting, we think that digital sovereignty is clearly a goal. We think that we should be more independent from global companies. And it's a big subject. Don't think it's just a limited subject. I just want to give you a testimony. This is the best news magazine in France, and it's about reducing our dependency. And guess what? Who is on the top list? Thierry Breton, with a clear claim, Thierry, Europe should monitor its future. And it's about data. And this is why, you know, we're considering that the data and the reduce of our dependency is clearly a goal. And this is why the reason we are supporting the Gaia X initiative that was launched by Thierry and by also German and French players. Because the Gaia X initiative has two dimensions. The control of a storage infrastructure, which are technological subject, and Thierry mentioned it. It's all about investment, it's all about technology, but also, second dimension, the control of a data exchange standards. And this is a regulatory subject. And Thierry outlined it very clearly that we need a framework that is able to support our companies. And we expect that just as a few years ago for privacy, the GDPR gradually established itself as a global standard, Gaia X can establish itself in the future as the global standard in terms of portability, reversibility, interoperability, and auditability of all business data. And I think that to build these standards, it's essential to work first between European actors. And I may be a little bit controversial about that, but I think that we need first to work between European actors before extending to other actors. And this is how Europe was built. When we built the common market, we started by building this common market within the open community. And afterwards, we tried to negotiate different agreements with other parties. And finally, to give a conclusion, we are launching a new initiative, which is called Themis. You remember, you know, in the God and the Goddess, Themis is the daughter of Gaia. And Themis is a public-private project for the development of data sharing of general interest for the Paris Olympics. You know that the Paris Olympics will take place in 2024. And we want to offer a data space for the Olympics, bringing together several leading industrial actors who would share their data to allow spectators and other people who are going to come for the Olympics to have an unparalleled experience in terms of transport, accommodation, on-site leisure. And the idea will be to give to the European a legacy, the legacy of this infrastructure. As you know, there's been sustainable infrastructure. You can remember maybe of the Shinkansen high-speed train that was built for the Tokyo Olympics in 1964. So as the idea was have to provide this infrastructure of data for the Olympics to be a legacy for the future and a new basis for the data. Thank you very much, Angelica.
Thank you, Olivier Siegel, for your excellent contribution as well. That was very helpful. Thanks for speaking so openly and so freely. I think amongst friends, amongst partners, you have to be very open and, well, addressing the issue of fair competition, of a fair level playing field. This is, I think, is very, very important for us and also for for clearly telling us that we do not have the right framework established right now in the European Union, but we have to work on it. And that brings me back to Thierry Breton, who forwarded a lot of good proposals, which we are working on in the European Parliament right now. Well, so let's stop here. I have two colleagues who already asked for the floor, who might like to come into the discussion right now. And I'd like to start with my dear colleague from Spain, Pilar de Castillo. Please take the floor, and after that, Christian Ehler is asking for the floor. Please, Pilar, go ahead.
Okay. It's okay now? No. Okay, now. Thank you very much, Angelica. And I want to thank the speaker. Thank you very much, Commissioner Thierry Breton. Thank you very much, Chris Hoff from the States. And thank you very much as well to Michel Olivier. I think it's a very timely discussion, at least here in the European Parliament, since we have such a number of files, legislative files, linked to data mostly, but in general to the digitalization of many different aspects. I think we could all agree that we must start a specific dialogue with the US on the responsibility of online platforms and big tech, work together on fair taxation, and develop a common approach protecting critical technologies. But let me say that it is also imperative, in my view, to discuss diverging views on data. You have mentioned that in all the three interventions, contributions. The views on data governance, and see how we can be overcome the problems and the difference we have. I'm not only referring to personal data, that was very much addressed by you, but potential data location requirements, interoperability, and security standards are good examples where progress on both sides of the Atlantic is also crucial. In this context, the upcoming 2021 summit by the new Biden administration, my question to all the speakers, to all the ones that want to answer to this, is how can we take this opportunity of that summit to intensify our cooperation to promote regulatory convergence and facilitate data flow? And especially, how can we do so quickly? Thank you very much.
Good question, Pilar. Thank you so much. Christian Ehler, please take the floor.
I would like to come back a little bit to the transatlantic relations. In December, the Commission proposed to the US administration to set up a trade technology council, and the European industry, I think also the American Chamber of Commerce, have endorsed that idea. And the question is right now, and we were starting to do legislation. And let's be realistic between friends. And I think that Olivier Siegel did set the tune. I mean, there are controversial issues. But I wouldn't like to fall back in this 19th century kind of idea that Google is necessarily an American company, and if you have a problem with a monopoly, this is a European US problem per se. I think we're talking about a market, a transatlantic market. And obviously we will get in trouble in the DSA and in the DMA. There will be questions on how to get access to metadata, to monopolies, to the algorithms and things like that. My question, but just comes back, I mean, in the end, we have to sort out our things. And my question to Secretary Hoff is, I mean, can we expect a reaction from the Biden administration on this? Because it would be important for us that the legislative process is somehow reflected by a transatlantic tie, because Thierry Breton is a mighty commissioner, but now this is in the hand of the parliament, and then it will be a negotiation with the council. So in parallel is there a panel where we talk about, or is it that we set up our things and then we get in some kind of negotiations, even in trouble? So my question to Assistant Secretary Hoff is, can we expect something from the American side in terms of an answer? And to Thierry, I mean, what is your perception of that? I mean, we want to have we call it an open strategic autonomy of Europe. But in the end, I mean, we have to sort out our relation with the US. And what is your perception right now in terms of that interaction between the two sides? Thank you.
Christian, thank you very much for these concrete questions, refreshing the transatlantic partnership. I'm really looking forward to hearing what our experts are commenting on, how they are going to comment on that. But let me also ask Andreas Schwab for his intervention, and then I would like to close the list because I know that our speakers have other commitments in due course. So please, Andreas, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Angelika. My question is quite outspoken, and it's directly linked to what Christian has said. I mean, when we really want to see that data space between the 27 member states of the European Union as an open data space that we share with the American friends, which is based on the same values, on the same principles, on the same competition rules, Assistant Secretary Hoff, what can we do to overcome already existing, let's say, little differences on the analog economy, on the old economy, to be overcome in the digital age? I think it's a key question because we are facing in a globalized economy challenges that go beyond our cooperation, and therefore we have to strengthen what links us to be really resilient for future challenges. That would be my question. Thank you so much, Angelika.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And without losing any time, I would like to ask our speakers now for answers. And maybe we start again with our Commissioner, Thierry Breton. Thierry, would you be so kind to take up questions addressed to you, please? And any further comments you'd like to make?
Well, no, thank you very much, Angelika. And very quickly, I think it's extremely important. And again, this meeting, this discussion is really timely because, of course, we are engaging on many aspects now with the new Biden administration, and we are happy to do this. Of course, I just would like to, before answering directly to the questions of Christian and also the comments of Andreas, just to tell you that, as you know, in addition to my task here at the Commission, I have been tasked also to be the head of EU task force for vaccine. And I would just like to tell you that in that perspective, I engaged with my counterpart, Jeff Zients, who is the US Chief of Task Force for Vaccine. We have many meetings on a weekly basis, and the relation is going extremely well, and it's extremely important. And we realize, by the way, both of us, that in this perspective, which is so important to us, it is definitely a European and US story. And this is because we are working together, including to make sure that our supply chains are working smoothly, that we will be able to hopefully to cope with this pandemic. So I just wanted to say that en passant, because of course, the relation, of course, we will enlarge now on the technology aspect, and the Commission proposed indeed dedicated channels on the topic of today. Many topics to discuss, especially in my portfolio, which is everything on digital and technology. But the first thing, of course, is the DSA and the DMA. And I think it's important to mention this to Chris, that we have been working already on this subject for more than 1 year now. It's already in discussion now with our co-legislator, in other words, our parliament. And of course, we did a huge work ahead of that, probably including a very large consultation with many let's say, US players answering to our questionnaire, and being a lot of contribution. So we have already this work which has been done, and by the way, we will probably have the same kind of issue to deal with, more or less with the same view. We share the same value. We see the same problems, including the one mentioned in Capitol Hills, but not only. And of course, this is what we tried to answer in the DSA, but also in the DMA. And it will be probably a very good idea to share first this expertise that we have, and also to share what we are doing, because the better we'll be aligned, the better it will be. And I'm absolutely convinced having lived myself from both sides of the Atlantic for so many years, that we should have a common view on this. So that's the first thing. Data flow, of course, is extremely important. Technology partnership in key technologies, this is extremely important also. But in this partnership, our philosophy is definitely to be strong, to have some things to exchange. You cannot make a partnership if you have one weak partner. So we have decided to be a strong partner in order to, but of course, we want to do this with our allies, and of course, US are our allies. But we'll invest a lot ourselves to make sure that when we build a partnership, that's like a bridge. You need two pillars. Our pillar here in Europe will be solid in this joint, let's say, view. Finally, we're expecting to start a dialogue structured on these issues. And again, I have reached out to my counterparts already in the US for that. So we are eager to start, and you will find definitely here some friends willing to work together with you in this topic. If on open data space, yes, but of course, Andreas, without naivety, we know that data has only volumes if let's say values if it flows. We know that it's extremely important to have the fluidity. So no interest, of course, to close Europe, but this has to happen according to our values and rules. And for instance, no data should be subject to unjustified access requests from third countries. And that's something which is extremely important and a strong request for our companies. So we have built in the DGA, Angelica, that you know very well. Thank you for your work on this, shielding provision to increase, of course, trust in Europe. So we know exactly where we want to go, and we know also who are our allies and partners, and this is why we are eager to start working together on all these subjects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thierry Breton, Commissioner, for your answers, and also for letting us know that the structured dialogue, EU-US dialogue, is going to start soon. I think that's really important. So thanks for that, and let me now directly come to Secretary Hoff. We are really keen and eager to learn, what your perspective is on and what you are going to answer. Again, we want a partnership, a transatlantic partnership on equal foot, and we are really looking forward now to your answers and comments. Please, Secretary, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm afraid I may not have time to get to all of these excellent points, but so let me stick with the high-level agreement that transatlantic relationship and partnership is critical to us. The president highly values relationships with allies. That's clear. Our secretary does. I do. This administration is quite heavily focused on that. We're reviewing the TTC, the Trade and Technology Council proposal, and any other potential formats for high-level dialogue. So any of these EU-US dialogues are top of mind and something that I think we're all starting. Our recent discussions here at the Department of Commerce with US industry indicate that there is strong support for the establishment of a forum for US-EU dialogue. And to talk about things like transatlantic cooperation, facilitating regulatory compatibility, and addressing market access barriers. So that is something that we are all working on and towards, and we're almost at the 3-month mark with the new administration, but a lot of these things are in process. And a lot of the dialogue takes into account the administration priorities of economic recovery, particularly from the pandemic, but economic recovery, racial equity, climate change. There are massive discussions to be had with very like-minded partners like the EU around these issues. And so I think these dialogues are the right places for us to come to agreement on the things that we all agree on so that we can protect citizens, compete together, and create an appealing model that's rooted in our shared values. So I'm looking forward to being part of all of that. Trying to think of what else was raised. I think that the discussions around, I think the long-term discussions around things like trusted government access to data and developing those principles where the European Union member states are sitting down at the table at OECD with, including the intelligence communities and law enforcement communities, with partners like the US to come to terms once and for all with what we all do and principles around that, so that we can get to these bigger issues. I mean, that's incredibly important, and that's why we're talking about it, and that's why we need to come to an agreement with each other around that. But there are so many big issues that we're working on together, the US and the EU. So I look forward to having all of those discussions.
So do we, Secretary Hoff. Thank you so much for your comments. I think it sounds promising. We have to rebuild our close and strong transatlantic partnership. So we are keen in doing that, and we are happy that the dialogue is going to start very soon. We will not agree on everything, but I really like that you made a reference again to our common values, which we share in the US and in the EU. And I think this is a good basis for further discussions. So thank you so much for joining us today, and well, looking forward to meeting you soon. But now, before I'm going to close this first panel, allow me to bring in Olivier Siegel once again, who has a lot of experience practically and also as head of his global think tank. I'm more than happy to learn what he thinks about the questions and discussions we had so far. Please, Monsieur Siegel, would you be so kind to take the floor?
Yes, thank you very much, Angelica. I just want to remind one important thing, and to avoid to be naive, that data space is operated by companies, and in that field, because the setting up the session and setting the global stage of data, you shouldn't forget that the data space needs a lot of investment to be competitive. And well, is that a fact or not? This space is operated by companies, and on both sides of the Atlantic, they are not the same side. You've got on one side very, very large companies that have got a huge advance in terms of data, in terms of AI, and on our side, there are fewer companies, smaller companies, and companies that have not the same level of investment. And that has been to be taken into account. I think at the beginning, Europe was slow, and I lived that very, very deeply during the time of Joaquim Almunia. I think that now Europe is moving extremely fast. And for me, that is some kind of blue sky operating in that field, because I think that the time of naivety and is now really finished, and the space where Thierry Breton and globally the European Commission is setting up the different framework for digital services, digital market, and digital governance is really a sign that really Europe is taking its future on its hands. And it's a great sign, it's very positive.
Thank you so much, Olivier Siegel, also for bringing us back to reality, to stressing again where we stand right now. So that is always very helpful, and I fully agree, you know, it's business community who is going to build the data spaces which we need. So thank you again for addressing that, and also for looking ahead, and that is what we want to do with this data summit today as well. I'd like to thank all our excellent speakers for their contribution. I thank my dear colleagues to intervene, and ladies and gentlemen who joined our first panel, thanks for listening and for following our discussion. And it's now my pleasure to move on and to bring Axel Voss, my dear colleague from the European Parliament, in, who is going to moderate the second panel. So thanks a lot, and please, Axel, take over.
Thanks a lot, Angelica. It's always nice to have you also on board, and thanks for moderating this in such a charming way. So now we are coming to different standards, probably in moderating. So what we are focusing now is creating the framework, and the general objective of this session should be identifying the key framework conditions that need to be in place for a European economy, and what needs to be in place in terms of regulation, infrastructure and services available for Europe's companies to increase their competitiveness through improved use of data. So what needs to be in place also in order for the European companies for capturing a substantial market share of a new global data services markets. So, and we have also a very distinguished panel with us today. So at first, I would like to introduce you to Katrina Dau, the board member also on My Data Global. Secondly, we have Dr. Magdalena Piech, the regulatory or responsible for the regulatory affairs at Allegro. And then we have the head of government affairs and public policy at Google Germany, Evelyn Metzen. And last but not least, we have the chief data officer of Telefonica, Francisco Montalvo. So not spending too much time, we just go into the details. And I would like to ask at first Katrina Dau to present for 5 till 7 minutes for your intervention, and please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you also to the EPP for asking me to join this very important session. I've been asked to speak to address 3 really important topics with respect to where we're heading. First of all, to consider a human-centric approach to data and how we manage data, what we need to do in terms of regulation to ensure that we make the most of data, how we can improve market access and SMEs, and this is an important point that follows on from the last session, and then how we can improve interoperability, security and trustworthiness of data across Europe, because ultimately having these infrastructure pieces in place, both soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure, it is going to be what will actually make a connected market. So if I can start with the idea of human-centric, and I would really like to challenge ourselves to what that means for the century ahead. Because I would say that we are on track towards a society that is supported through artificial intelligence, but we've already entered extended intelligence. I'm sitting here today, I can count, I think, at least 6 devices, 2 of them that are very close to my person. So many of the decisions that I make every day are part of this extended intelligence. And if you think of a child born today in the European Union, they're not going to understand many of the things that we have grown up with in an analog world. Everything will be digital. And so some of the decisions that we need to be thinking about now is, what does human-centric mean? And not what my generation, our generation understands, but what does the world look like 20, 30, 50 years from now, when we have a greater fusion between the digital world and the physical world. And when we start to think of this phygital world and we think about data, it will be very hard to separate the person from the information, or the entity, the organization from the information. And so the value and the idea of data actually becomes one and the same with who we are. And so I think one of the key things we need to be thinking about is, what is the type of human-centric society that we may want in the future? And are there some of the decisions that we need to make now architecturally, while we have this opportunity, that are similar to some of the decisions that we would have made as we moved from an agrarian society to an industrial society? What are some of the things that we put in place to protect society as we moved through making decisions that built cities, built infrastructure? We're doing exactly those same things now in the digital sense. And maybe one of those first things is to think of a digital bill of rights. What does it mean? in the coming century to be human, to have this availability of extended intelligence, and how do we balance that with the needs of a human-centric approach for Europe. So in having that framework in mind, how do we then create market access for startups and SMEs? I think this is a really critical thing, and I'm actually representing 3 bodies here today. I am a board member for My Data. I'm also a founding member for Data Sovereignty Now, and I'm also the founder and CEO of a startup in the space, Miko. And so one of the things as an SME, which is really critical, is that small organizations often have the agility, they take the risks to imagine a different future, they're able to move fast. And what I've been able to see in different parts of the world is when this balance between the agility of small organizations or scaling organizations together with government or enterprise, when these partnerships are forged, that is when you have the best outcomes. When you have access to market and funding that is able to support new ideas, innovation, and the agility, and how you bring these 2 things together. So I think one of the things that we can focus on is in strengthening. I think one of the important points that was made in the last session is that you can't be a good partner around the world unless we are able to do that here in Europe, and we are strong. And part of that starts with how we invest in the innovation and in the partnerships that already exist within this area. And then last but not least, how we can focus on interoperability, security and trustworthiness. And I think the clues there are around standards and leveraging some of the infrastructure that is already in place. Soft infrastructure that may come from existing standards. We have right now the rise of decentralized applications, blockchain, distributed ledger, and we have existing legacy systems in enterprise and government. What is this middle path that will actually enable us to bring some of these technologies to existing technologies? And part of that is focusing on some of the soft infrastructure to make this interoperability possible, building technological bridges that actually start to build a network of capability much, much faster. And so in summary, I would say our focus must be, what do we want our human-centric Europe to look like 50 years from now? How can we incentivize organizations to cooperate? And what can we leverage that is existing right now in terms of some of the soft infrastructure that exists to build those networks very quickly? Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina, also for this broad overview right now. Of course, we need more answers, also probably later on from you, for all the questions you have also raised at the end. So, but now we are moving forward to Dr. Magdalena Piech, the regulatory affair expert at Allegro. Please, Magdalena.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your thoughts and introduction. I'm very happy to be able to contribute to this discussion from a perspective of a European champion, European tech company. And before I make my contribution to the debate, let me first applaud the European Commission, but also EPP, for taking such a strong and thoughtful approach to this topic. So for those who don't know Allegro, we are a retail company, an online marketplace that is based in Poland. We operate in Poland only, but nevertheless, we are 8th online retailer in Europe. And last year, Allegro had the most successful European tech IPO in Europe. So our technology, our goal is to, through technology, enable third parties, so business and consumers, to sell and shop online. We started already 20 years ago, and our road began from a basic platform for C2C sale of second-hand goods. And over time, we developed to an advanced platform that facilitates transactions through a series of technological solutions that we offer ourselves, such as search engine, advertising, more recently data analytics tools for our sellers, or in cooperation with our partners, such as payment and delivery solution. Just to give you a taste of how much data we've collected, apologies if you hear my dog, just to give you a sense of how much data we collected over the last 20 years, we recently celebrated 20 billionth transaction that was concluded. A long story short, to have a look at all these offers, it would take you 30 years. And what is more important, every second, 28 new offers appear on our platform. So to the point that the number of data is growing, we cannot agree more. When it comes to online world that we as Allegro operate to a large extent, every event, in our case, search for a product, adding product to a basket, buying it or dropping a transactions, create some sort of data. Yet what I would like to underline here is that the difference between an organization that collects and stores data and the one that has the ability to understand this data and improve organization and product or service we offer is a vast one. For Allegro, this transformation started more or less 3 years ago, and the process is ongoing. What is interesting, of course, we started from people. You cannot have AI solutions if you don't have data engineers or data scientists that are able to create algorithms that improve your operations. Furthermore, we of course develop our storing and computing capacities, being aware that we need to have adequate infrastructure and tools for the future. I think that as the amount of data is growing exponentially, and it will grow even faster now as the digitalization speeds up and the world is moving online. Moreover, there is still so much unused, or we could say undiscovered data in the offline world. As much as when we talk data, we focus on online, but I agree with the point that was made about industrial data or even retail data that are available. So just to give you an example, Allegro sellers amount to 6% of retail in Poland. That means that 94% of data regarding retail are still offline. Thus, I think that we need to see this data evolution as something that is relevant both for online and offline. And as the world goes multi-channel, there will be a lot of opportunities for cooperating in sharing this data, but also in making use of this data. So thus, I think that as businesses, all sectors, to stay on the top, must undergo a major transition to be able to, let's put it that way, surf on the wave rather than be knocked over by it. Now, the question of the panel is how to get the framework right. I agree with the landscape that was drawn during the first panel, but to have a more focused view from a perspective of European tech company, but also because today I'm speaking on behalf of Allegro, but I also have the honor to be the chair of the European Tech Alliance that brings together other European tech companies. So I think what I will share would also resonate with their thoughts. But let me share the following. First, when we start regulating, let's focus on the existing framework. I think that the GDPR that was already mentioned, for every tech company, it's really a key legislation that governs how we deal with personal data, how we ensure privacy, how we ask for consent, how we make or use automated decision technique, and how we use safeguards to make sure that these rights are protected. So we have GDPR, we have P2B. Before platform to business, so regulation ensuring fairness, and transparency in platforms to business regulation. These are key pieces of legislation for us. What we want to underline is that before we start regulating, let's make sure that we don't multiply existing provisions, but also let's take stock what is already written in regulation but may not be exactly enforced, and then as a last point, where regulations could be useful. I would argue that the right framework is the one that amplifies fairness, promotes innovation and data sharing, and provides for meaningful transparency. And as I don't want to take too much time, I will just give you a few comments on the key regulatory files that are or will be soon discussed. When it comes to DMA, our position is that when a company holds a key to enormous, detailed, cross-service data that is uncomparable to anyone at EU or global scale, or when it provides services without which one simply cannot operate on the digital market, then they need to make sure that the door remains open for all. And the DMA should play a crucial role here. First of all, as it allows to capture European and global dimension of the digital market, it allows and should allow for adequate enforcement at the EU level, comparable with the one that national champions face at the local level. It introduces a clear list of do's and don'ts for companies. It prohibits the misuse of data and self-preferencing, and also it provides access to important data to companies which don't have such an extensive database. When it comes to promoting innovation, I would say an upcoming AI regulation will be very important. Algorithms, machine learning, and AI play a crucial role in translating the ocean of the data into meaningful information. To give you an example of Allegro, to offer our clients relevant products out of 200 million products available on the platform, algorithms and machine learning plays an important role. For us to lift simple, non-contextual, repetitive activities from people to algorithm is something that allows us to improve efficiency of the processes, be it something as trivial as verifying as the offer of the product that is put on the picture matches the one as in the offer description. These AI and algorithmic solutions are also helpful in logistic management and to increase security by, for example, signaling potentially fraudulent activities among so many transactions that take place on our platform. We are totally in line with the approach of the Commission and the high-level expert group that use of AI needs to be ethical. We, in our use, we make sure that we stay fair, not exploitative, risk averse, and that we are very customer or value oriented. Whereas I believe that these guidelines from the AI high-level expert group and the upcoming regulation will be very useful to set these internal rules and self-regulation for us. We think that when it comes to AI regulation, this should really focus on high risk applications. And two last points, because I see that my time is running out. We see a lot of transparency requirements across regulation, AI, DSA, DMA. What I would like to underline is that we don't see a value in sharing data or sharing information for the sake of sharing information. What matters is that data provided refers to key features of the service that it uses and the impact that this information can have on data user, be it consumer or businesses. And last but not least, regardless of what regulation we will adopt, essential for Allegro, but other European companies as well, is that these rules must effectively apply to all the players that are active on the European market, and all regulations needs to be equipped with an efficient enforcement measures that can also allow also to sanction potential non-compliance, regardless of where the company is located. Thank you very much for the attention, and I'm very happy to answer questions later on.
Thank you, Magdalena, for your clear wish list of things what we should also do. And I do not really know if your dog was agreeing or not agreeing to what you have said. But
she tends to agree with me. That's at least how I always perceive what she's barking.
Very good. That's good to know. So then we are coming now to Evelyn Metzen, once again, the head of government affairs and public policy from Google Germany. Evelyn, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your data summit and to attend this panel. I'm especially delighted to be part of this European conversation. So in addressing the topic of the panel, I would like to first take the angle of the user. Fundamentally, it is the user's decision with whom they want to share their data, to whom they trust their data. And this is an expression of their fundamental rights. So this makes it all the more important to develop privacy-preserving technologies that enable data usage without interfering with users' rights. One way of ensuring that data is accessible is through data portability, of course. And Google has been at the forefront of data portability for more than a decade, long before even the GDPR addressed this issue. And already in 2007, Google formed a team of engineers that developed early iterations of our data portability tools to allow users to export a copy of their data from Google products. 4 years later, and long before it was legally required, we launched a data portability product called Google Takeout to centralize this function. Takeout currently allows users to export a copy of their data from 70 Google products like Chrome, Search, Gmail, Drive, or YouTube in a machine-readable format, including sending a copy directly to certain competing services. We have expanded these efforts through our work on the data transfer project DTP, an open source service-to-service data portability platform. And DTP is aimed at making it easier for users to transfer their data directly between online services. Google founded and continues to lead the data transfer project together with other industry partners, so that a company of any size can build data portability tools that enable users to switch easily between services and products they like best. So our tools for data portability, by the way, are developed in Germany in our Google Safety Engineering Center in Munich. And our engineers they basically set the standard for our Google safety and security tools worldwide. So from a company point of view, there are already existing tools, technologies that is, to ensure data operability. Now the Commission is looking for additional tools in the European data strategy to incentivize a single market for data and make Europe a leader in a data-driven society. This is an endeavor where you have to walk a fine line to not create unreasonable barriers and in the end, hamper innovation. In addition to that, we think it's important that regulation leaves space and gives positive signals for the development and use of privacy-preserving technology, so that data can be used by many for the benefit of all without infringing on the individual rights. You might be wondering why Google would put so much effort in this. Well, first of all, because we understand that data portability is key to innovation. And also, Google has always believed that people should use our products and services because they think they create value and valuable features. But if a user wants to switch to another product or service because they think that is better, they should be able to do so as easily as possible. And this concept of allowing users to choose products and services based on their own choice rather than being locked in, that helps to drive innovation and also, of course, facilitates competition. Likewise, in the B2B area, where Google Cloud, for example, offers services to European customers from the private and also the public sector, we believe it's possible to establish the right level of data control, transparency, openness, and trust without sacrificing innovation and compromising the competitiveness of local economies. We address European customers and also policymakers' priorities and concerns, which are often presented under the umbrella of digital sovereignty, also as we just heard from our speakers before. And we address those on 3 levels. First, on the data level, through mechanisms to prevent the provider from accessing the customer data. Second, on the operational level, through assurances that the people working at a cloud provider cannot compromise customer workloads. And thirdly, on the software level, through enhanced ability to control the availability of customer workloads and run them wherever they want, without being dependent on or locked in to a single cloud provider. However, and we've heard this also on the previous panel, we know that there's fear about vendor lock-in. And that's why we give European companies and partners more choices with our open cloud approach and help them leverage the cloud to create greater value with their local economies. And some of the leading cloud providers like OVH Cloud partner with us because of our open approach and mission. And of course, we're really proud to be among the 212 day 1 members of the Gaia X Association who joined the 22 German and French founding members. And because we do share the commitment to an open cloud environment across Europe, which offers flexibility, openness, and puts data control directly in the hands of the user. Well, since we're discussing today what Europe can do to foster interoperability and data portability, I would like to acknowledge that Europe, with its GDPR, is clearly leading the way in one of the most quickly evolving areas of law, and that is privacy and data protection. And with that, Europe is raising the bar for privacy legislation and inspiring other countries, including, so we hope, the United States, to follow suit. And allow me one comment, because we're also looking at the question of a more human-centric approach on this panel. I believe that skills should actually be at the center of the European effort on data-driven innovation. Data and technology themselves or alone are not the sole enablers of innovation. So the skills needed to make the most of data using technology play a critical role in my mind. And organizations need to upskill their talent in critical areas such as, and we heard this, AI, machine learning, data analytics, or cloud computing. And although, of course, all these tools and technologies are already on the market and they exist, they are not achieving their full potential because of the lack of skills or awareness gaps. So let me say one thing in closing. Last but not least, supporting industry-led efforts like open source data project like ours, the Data Transfer Project, that can encourage more companies to participate and use this open source solution to create data portability. So I'm looking forward to the further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn, also for your vision and your approach to these. And because of the timing, I'm going forward directly now to our last speaker on this panel so far, the Chief Data Officer of Telefonica, so Francisco Montalvo. You're welcome, and please go ahead, Francisco.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity on behalf of Telefonica. Telefonica is a true believer of the impact of the revolution coming from the database services and how it's right and fair implementation. It will help the life of European citizens. I think everyone is aware about how vocal our chairman has been on the data revolution since 2017, when our project, the fourth platform, was first introduced to the market. We have the determination of implementing differential approach to the data wall in our business in 2 different angles. The first one is a technological transformation that we need, driving an actual ecosystem within Telefonica for all the required assets. We talk about data, but for the data to work, the data wall to work, we need to take into consideration identity management, API management, privacy per design, and then some other elements like one click. Then the second element is the UX first approach. We want the customer to feel comfortable in the data world. And we want to make sure that transparency and control is something that our customers can enjoy because they actually understand that. It's been very interesting that in some of the previous conversations, for example, our colleague Mrs. Pierre has made very clear that transparency is a very relevant topic. And also Mrs. Metzen was very clear about the fact that customers need to be aware about what data means, and they need to have the ability to access that data in a very free manner. Privacy management is at the core of our project. Implementing privacy by design would means that any relevant investment is always performed at the beginning of the project to make sure that we simplify the rest of the chain. So just as an example, in Telefonica, our applications and services do not need to handle any privacy-specific term because it's all done at the platform level. So we have a single point of control for the privacy management, and that same single point of control is provided to our customers to make sure that they are free to handle their privacy. This requires a massive mindset change with the redesign of our processes. It's not only about technology, it's also about changing the processes, the business processes that are articulating the commercial offering. However, it brings us a full control of the privacy flows and comfort to our customers. We are fully convinced about the value of data sharing, and we acknowledge that we have part of the responsibility as a relevant player in the mobility industry. We have supported since day one, and I can tell you that it's specifically day one, to COVID-19 spread models by sharing anonymous mobility matrices with health authorities. And we believe that this has become instrumental to correlate mobility and pandemic evolution. This is something that we keep on doing today, and we understand that's essential. It's our responsibility to be part of this. But we believe that this is just the tip of a massive iceberg that is still to be capitalized. We cannot be reactive to these emergencies. We have to be proactive in all the areas where the well-being of our citizens can be impacted. So climate change, for example, is one of the areas where we want to make sure that all the data that we are gathering is being managed and is provided to those who can actually impact strongly on this. Investments are needed in this area. I'm happy to see that Mr. Siegel said before, data space needs investment to be competitive. And that's actually true. This is something, data flows are not easy to manage. The multiple sources of data that any big company has are a problem, an operational problem that we have to deal with every single day. So if we want to make this industrial, we have to invest. And this is an investment that needs to be supported. That's why we believe that best effort is not an option if we really want to capitalize this opportunity for our citizens. So we are demanding a solid framework that can actually stimulate the data sharing, but provides legal security, commercial drive, and transparency rights. It's been Commissioner Breton who said before, we want to create a stable and predictable environment. That's exactly what we demand. We are talking about personal data that is the most sacred piece of data that is generated, and we need to manage that properly with legal security. I have also heard Mr. Hoff saying interoperability. That's essential. And I think we need to get into the detail because interoperability is not obvious. Even the interoperability of data inside the systems of one single company is not an easy task to manage. So we really need to take this very seriously. What kind of data and how we want to make that interoperable. And this is a conversation that we need to go into very detail. And there is something that has been said before that I agree, and it's user decides who to share data with. And I am fully aligned with that. However, I would like to add that we have the responsibility of educating people about what data, either personal or non-personal data, means, how it can impact the privacy management, how it can impact their lives, and also their freedom to decide. because it's not obvious for uneducated people, and to be educated in this specific matter is not easy because of the very different scenarios that you can face. You need to educate people to understand that data sharing may have impacts that they are not actually able to anticipate. So I have been very vocal on this. Every single time I have the opportunity to talk to regulators, I always say we are always taking as a secondary step, as a secondary element, education of our citizens. But until we don't have a very clear education, until we are not able to explain them the opportunities, but also the risks of this revolution, we are going to have a problem. I have 4 kids myself, and talking to them about what it means to using TikTok or Facebook or WhatsApp, how is that is actually impacting on their lives? It's a complex conversation, but once you are able to show that visiting one page has immediate impact on the advertising you are receiving in the next one, well, it starts to make them to think in a different way. So we have that responsibility, and Telefonica is fully committed to make this to happen. We as a European company want to make sure that we are providing most of the value. So thank you very much for the time. And thank you very much to my colleagues, because they have been talking most of the topics I had in my list. So they have made most of the work. Thank you.
Thanks, Francisco, also for your position and approach to this subject. And now we have already 2 colleagues who would like to have a question here right now, and I'm starting with Eva Meidel, and then Pernille Weiss would also like to ask something. Please, Eva, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Axel, and thank you to the distinguished speakers today. I'm glad to have collaborated in the past, and I look forward to more collaboration and enhanced collaboration as the topic of enhancing the opportunities and potential of data are key and at the center for our group in the Parliament. I'll be very brief, as I've been asked to narrow down the questions in 30 seconds, and it's a very concrete question. Obviously, I'm one of those MEPs, but also a citizen that supports data flows. And I would like to hear from you, what have been your challenges in nurturing data sharing culture within your own domains, but also what challenges do you foresee globally on the matter? What we see is that it's good to preach among ourselves, even it's today's discussion, but we very often are on the same page of what we want to see. However, it's very important to make sure that these same views are shared also by companies that haven't told that the potential of data could make them grow, could enhance their workings, their manufacturing, or any other field that they're responsible for, as well as when it comes to citizens, when it comes to this data sharing culture. So thank you. I would be very interested to hear from you.
Eva, and unfortunately our colleague Pernille Weiss can't connect or has connection problems, but please give me the opportunity also to read her question, and I hope I get the essence of it. And so her question is related to a very hot topic in her country. This is Denmark. And she's hoping you all excuse this, it's maybe unique character in respect or to the scope of most of the very valuable speakers' input, but the Danish government is right now preparing to do a copycat of the Australian government aimed at making Google and Facebook pay for news content on their problems again, and the Social Democrat-led government is acting out of synchronizing with the EU. So in the proposal, the media enterprises are suggested to collectively negotiate the agreement with the digital platforms. The small media entrepreneurs and SMEs fears that this will suppress their interest in a broader perspective, therefore destroy innovation on the media market, and in the bigger picture also the diversity and pluralism of our democracy. So she would be very happy to have your input and reflections on it. Thank you very much. But this gives me also probably the opportunity to ask a question myself, if I may. So we have heard already the transatlantic dimension, but I see the competition already is more on a two-dimensional situation. So at first, we have a competition going on between EU and the US. So we are always tracing the big tech companies, US companies, and also trying to establish a better European way of being a part of the digital world. Then there's another dimension also between the Western world and the Chinese or Asian world. And so would this, and how you're seeing these as companies, at least so we are in a multi-dimensional situation, and therefore would this lead to a kind of situation where data monopolies probably should open up their data treasures to others, that we are all from a Western world are making progress and trying to be a kind of the leading power in the world of digital affairs. So this would be a kind of a more political, of course, question, but I would be very interested to see also your view on this. Thanks. And we are starting like what we have done this. So Katrina, if you would like to start, it would be good.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to attempt to answer all three questions as aspects of a similar theme. I think first starting with the differences in terms of culture and value that we see maybe from an Asian perspective, a US perspective, and a European perspective. And I think this, if I link back to the earlier comments that I made, it's really around some of the decisions that we make today are going to determine the society that we have tomorrow. And one of the things that we know that the US does incredibly well is it's very market driven. It has a very mercantile approach to allowing markets to form and then to dominate. In Asia, we know that that is often characterized by the power of the state. And here in Europe, we know that particularly when it comes to things like data protection, data regulation, the needs of the citizen have been at the forefront of some of that data regulation, which we hear is now under consideration in places like the United States. And interesting, the fine to Alibaba this week in China, one of the issues was over data privacy and data access. So we see different forms and flavors of that. Where we must converge, whether or not it's around who has dominance in our media, or the consequences, or this issue of transparency from the first question, comes back to what is the society that we imagine? Because the decisions that we make today in terms of market access, regulation, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm an Australian. I'm based here in Belgium, but the issues with the media in Australia is something that I'm very connected to. However, whilst it looked like the Australian government was standing up towards what looked like dominance from external, particularly US media, it was also trying to pacify some of the very strong control that we have in Australia from a media perspective. So maybe the aims and objectives were well intentioned, but not necessarily what was trying to be achieved. However, the important thing to the issue of Denmark is, if what we're trying to achieve is this level playing field, or is this transparency, or the consequences of our decisions, I think this is the key theme between each of these questions. what can we do to support data flow? We need to think of what the consequences of those are and how we can minimize data collection, but maximize decision enablement. This issue of news and access to news, how do we build transparency and also a level playing field so that there can be an opportunity and diversity of access? And then last but not least, this issue in terms of how we can compete against some of these other markets. I think one of the things that's unique about Europe is the fact that we are thinking of designing society around the role of the citizen and around the role of an open market and around the role of strengthening our cooperation. And for me, all of these things converge with the idea of the type of society we want to design. As we have clarity of that, then it makes it much, much easier to put decisions in place that impact or are protected through regulation or are enabled by the types of technologies that we adopt, that we fund, and that we are able to scale.
Thank you. Now, Magdalena, would you continue, please?
Of course, with pleasure. And I hope this time it's going to be only me without any background comments. So when it comes to data sharing, I would say, and the question of MEP Maidel, thank you very much for that. I would say that way, from a practical point of view, the blur line between what is personal data, what is not personal data, that is stemming from the fact that definition of personal data in the GDPR is quite broad and quite blur. I know that in practice it poses questions whether we can share this data. So I would say let's make sure that if we talk about non-personal data, we don't make it, we create as much certainty that data sharing is possible as possible. But I would like to focus here on something less obvious, I think, the quality of data. So to give you an example, before Allegro became a publicly listed company, we had the website, the Open API, which in fact allows certain companies, which were big companies, to scrape the data and put a platform with data on what was happening on Allegro. But although we could say there was a full data openness, in practice there were very few players that were able to use this data, especially if you're an SME and you don't have capacity to analyze it properly. So what we did, as we were forced to close API after becoming public, we prepared a tool for our sellers that is called Trade Analytics, that provides every seller with the data about their sale, the average prices of a good they sell. They can compare trends. So we provide useful, meaningful data for individuals, and we take care of quality of data. So I think data sharing, again, for the sake of data sharing, won't change that much. On the point on copyright, I wouldn't like to comment on this specific issue. I'm not really into details, but of course, whenever we want to regulate technology or one element in, let's say, value chain, we need to take into account how it will impact other elements. Whether in this specific case, it will have negative or positive, we really need to have an in-depth case-by-case analysis. But I think the third question is something that I would like to focus because you, MEP Voss, raised a very important point to us. So I think that we share the view that Europe should be an open market. We would never ask for any sort of protectionist. What from a European company is relevant, that sometimes European companies don't have as good conditions to scale as American or Chinese companies, because simply the market is bigger, the regulations are different, possibly a bit looser. So here, what we could do is to make sure that we really have European single market, so that it's easier to expand and grow for European companies. But what's more important, I think, if a company wants to address its services to European customers or businesses, what is essential that is that the company plays along European rules. There should be no joyriding, being on data, on consumer rules, on VAT, on customs, etc. And I don't want to, I mean, I think that it's obvious that we're not there yet. So therefore, what we highly value is the proposal that was suggested in the Digital Services Act to make sure that a company that is not located in the European Union have an actual legal representative that can serve as a contact point for authorities, but in our opinion, also for consumers, and that the entity can be held accountable, sanctioned if necessary, and as a last resort, that compared a bit with the freedom of goods, that a good can circulate through the European Union when it legally enters one of the European countries, right? If that's not the case, then we should have tools in place to simply ban access to the European market for those that ignore European rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I missed your dog in the background. But we are moving forward to Evelyn.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. So I'll start with the data flow question, and I will answer this from sort of an international level or with an international view. So ensuring free data flows, of course, is very important. And it's important that the EU and other jurisdictions have sort of contracts and good sort of a good framework in place to make that in a trustful and secure way. And of course, the US comes top of mind because we were asked about challenges. And this, of course, is not only sort of our challenge as Google, but that of I'm speaking for the entire sort of business industry in Europe. It's a challenge for everyone. The situation that we're in right now with the invalidation of the privacy shield, and we're very glad that the Biden administration is prioritizing these efforts and has already signaled that the talks will be advanced, and so we really hope that the EU and the US will come to a good agreement, because it's not only bad for tech companies, but for, I think, everyone who's operating on the global market. Because today most of the companies are digitized, and it's not only us. So that's my point to the first question. And then to the second question, when it comes to paying for content, it is absolutely true that the business model of the classical publishers or news publishers is under pressure, and I think it is what it is, and it's all the more important that we find ways to support, foster, and strengthen quality journalism. And so the question is, how do we do this? And actually, Google has found, I think, a solution that at least the publishers that we work with find really helpful, because we created this tool. It's called Showcase, where we actually go into license contract negotiation with the publishers to help them show their news content online, and they have the right to, or not the right, but the ability to really curate the way they want to show the news, the content. It's really completely in their hands. So this is actually a very good way of, first of all, following with their business model through licensing contracts with Google, and at the same time gaining sort of the presence that they need and developing their business model for the future, because it is the way that people are looking for news and information in different ways today than they used to 10 years ago. And I know this for Germany, we're working together with almost all of the publishers, big and small, with Showcase. We're expanding this. So I think that is a very good alternative. And we get very, very good feedback from the publishers on this. On your question, Mr. Voss, on the two-dimensional way of competition, allow me one short comment before I make my actual point, because you said we're tracing US companies, and that's your one angle of the competition question, right, EU? And I think that's actually, you're making a very good point here, because I think the discussion also when we talk about sovereignty or EU autonomy falls actually short when you look at Google and other companies as merely US companies, because Google is so deeply rooted in the EU, in every member state, and we're a partner of society and of the businesses, especially of the small and medium-sized businesses. And we help them grow and innovate and become sort of bigger in export. And I think that is often overlooked when when we talk about Google as this one American tech company that should be traced. So actually, we have a huge ecosystem of companies that we're partnering with and who are thriving because of this partnership. But to your point of the West-China competition, I think that is super important that we raise this, especially when we discuss European autonomy or strategic autonomy. I would actually really advocate for more strategic interdependence with like-minded countries like the US. And I've always worked in transatlantic relations, so please forgive me if I'm making a really strong point here, but it's a matter of my heart here. I think pursuing a go-it-alone approach is really the wrong way, because after all, everything is so interconnected and global that Europe can't do it all alone. And I think we neglect sort of the Western community of democracy. And I think everyone would be much stronger, the citizens and the companies, if we really understood that this is the way forward, especially vis-a-vis China, where we see that they're expanding their influence and they don't share the same set of values as we do. So, and I think congrats on the US-EU Trade and Technology Council proposal. I think that is actually the right way of addressing this and of really going forward jointly.
Evelyn, moving fast to Francisco.
Okay, so thank you, Axel. Just because of I'm cautious on time and I know that we are behind schedule, I will try to summarize the three topics in just a couple of reflections. First of all, we are talking about data sharing, and data sharing is not a minor issue. I would like to introduce a topic that is really concerning us. That is, we are completely open to the fact that customers decide they want to share their personal data, but how can we balance the value of that data versus the service the customers may have against that? So I always put the same example. If I want to open my new business, and that business is going to be an online betting company. So, and I say, okay, guys, if you provide me with your personal data every single month, I will give you €5 for free every month, just for you to bet on whatever you want, on the football, on basket, and whatever you want, even on politics. Well, are those €5 worth versus the exposure of the personal data and personal information that we are bringing because of that? It is not Telefonica who has to decide at all. But this is a discussion that we really need to have, because we are not responsible. It's up to customer to decide. But the fact that customer says, well, I give you my explicit content to share this data, doesn't mean that the customer is ready to understand this. This coming back to my previous comment on education. So let me be a bit radical here. We believe that explicit consent is overrated in some cases when it comes around data sharing. And then for the last part of the other two topics, I will mix them a bit. We are in the moment of heavy investments in Europe. We are investing in fiber. You know that in Spain, we have been doing that since previous decade. And during this pandemic and the lockdown, the quality of service that we had at home was fantastic, as good as you could have in any corporate environment. We didn't have to reduce the bandwidth of our video services because fiber has provided a differential advantage to customers. Now we are doing the same with 5G. And we are starting to invest on Edge. That is a technology that we believe is going to bring new businesses for all the players, both for telco, for digital players, and for new companies and new industries that will be able to get a lot of value for that. For example, car infrastructuring, it's a lot of different companies. it doesn't make any sense that we are repeating in 5 years' time the same conversations and discussions that we were having 10 years ago. We really need to make sure that all this is balanced. We really need to have a level playing field, especially when we know that any of the services that we are going to bring are going to multiply the production of data, both personal and non-personal data, and we need a very strong regulation. As it has been said before, not for the next 5 years, but for the world we want to bring to our citizens in the next decades. So, well, it's a complex matter, but I'm sure that we are ready to have the right answers. So thank you.
Thanks, Francisco. And because of timing, I just let me to thank you. You have been wonderful. You have been excellent. And let's keep in touch to create the framework and the future together. And I hope we can do here something together. And now I'm passing on to my wonderful colleague, Pablo Arias, and he's now leading the third panel. And please forgive me, Pablo, that I have taken 9-10 minutes from you. So you have to speed up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Axel. Thank you very much for your kindness. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this panel called Making Data Work. I'm Pablo Arias. I'm the Vice Coordinator of the EPP in the Internal Market and the Consumer Protection Committee. I'm glad to be moderating this important panel today with such top-level speakers. This panel aims to identify the concrete opportunities and challenges for businesses and organizations to use data to the full extent. To do so, let me introduce to you our top-level speakers. First, we have Dr. Amandep Gill. Dr. Gill is Director of the Global Health Center Project on International Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence Research Collaborative. Lars Malou is also joining us today. Mr. Malou is co-founder and Chief Technology Officer at Corti, a machine intelligence company that provides support and health to health practitioners. Furthermore, we have Ana García Robles. Mrs. García Robles is Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association, which aims to promote the best uptake of big data value technologies and services for professional and private use. And last but not least, we have with us Professor Dr. Isabel Huelpe. Professor Dr. Huelpe is the Academic Director of the Center for Digital Technology and Management at the Technical University of Munich. Thank you all for being here today with us. We will start with your initial presentations and then move to our Q&A session. Each speaker will have, as the rules of this summit ask us, have between 5 and 7 minutes for the initial presentations. I want to remind you that we have to be very strict with the timing, so we have to finalize this summit at 5 o'clock. Therefore, I will take the liberty to interrupting the speakers in case they extend too much. Sorry in advance for that. We will start with Dr. Gill. Dr. Gill, what can we do to strengthen a data-driven research and innovation environment in the EU? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to the EPP and MEP, Dr. Axel Voss, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of IDER. We are based in Geneva, but we have regional hubs in Tunis, New Delhi, Singapore, Nairobi, Santiago, and here in Geneva. You can think of us as a new global platform for harnessing the digital transformation for universal health coverage. We like to think of ourselves as a distributed CERN, the European Center for Nuclear Research, which is based here across the border in France and in Switzerland, for combining resources, research resources, capabilities across different geographies to address the big challenges around health, and COVID-19 is just one example. Now, I want to make 5 points today for the consideration of this summit. And the first one is about timing. So on data, we are moving from what can be called a phase of criticism, where existing models of data governance, essentially where the user hands over data ownership and access rights through a one-sided consent mechanism, to a phase of creativity where different governance solutions from data commons and data collectives to cooperatives and collaboratives to fiduciaries such as personal data stores are being experimented with, invented, and rolled out. There are plenty of examples from Europe: Airbnb in Bologna, Decode in Barcelona and Amsterdam, and so on. So what I want to suggest in my first point is that we need to think ahead about the next phase, which is the co-creation of data governance and data use, particularly in areas where there is knowledge creation involved, so research and development involved. And this is a no-brainer for the EU because EU has led on large research collaborations from the CERN that I mentioned to the Human Brain Project and so many more. The second point I want to make is that just as EU has led in the past with the GDPR on personal data protection and privacy, EU should lead, Europe should lead on promoting data commons and data collaboration for research and development in health based on high standards of governance and data quality. Why? Because in parallel to addressing the problem of misuse, we need to address the problem of misuse. And many speakers have mentioned that companies need to take advantage of the growing data in this space to build new products, new services. So in addition to addressing the governance side, we need to look at the promotion of use based on very, very high standards of governance. It's in a sense the good use of data driving out the bad and exploitative use of data over the long term. And if you ask me why health, why not trade or other places where data is equally active and useful? And this is because this is where the societal benefits are the most obvious. And some of the challenges that we face are the most obvious. And COVID-19 has refocused attention on science and on resilient health systems. As they say, why waste a good crisis? So the COVID-19 crisis is an opportunity to take this forward. The third point I want to make is that R&D is important. Research and development around data is very important. Take one prime exhibit from the COVID-19 crisis. Today, if we have vaccines, if we have diagnostic tests so rapidly available, it's because in January 2020, a digital platform was used to share genomics data from the SARS-CoV-2 virus across the globe, which allowed companies to start working on those products. This was, in a sense, a game changer. So digitally enabling research collaboration within the European space and beyond is a critical need at this point in time. The fourth point I want to make is why should we go for data commons or data collaborators where the private sector data also comes in as an approach to promoting research and development, which is data enablement. The reason is when we choose such a modality, what happens is responsible stewardship comes in automatically. There is a subsidiarity approach. So local data, national data, regional data, European-wide data, and governance kind of tracks these different levels of data in this federated approach. Local data contributes to solving local problems and building the capacity and the ecosystem around data science. In our own work in IDEA, we are working on antimicrobial resistance. So there's a growing pandemic of pathogens not responding to current antibiotics. So we are using data sets in India and Singapore and Africa to build AI-based diagnostic systems and clinical decision support systems that help doctors prescribe the right antibiotic without any need to kind of collect data in one space. So data stays local and the results, the common problem definition, the common development of AI creates trust in the outcomes coming out of that data. So I'll conclude. My last point is about some suggestions to the European Union going forward. Firstly, I think in the current European focus on the regulatory instruments, There should be a focus on collaborators which combine data curation in a distributed manner and collaborative use with a distributed research infrastructure, including tools and services. And why do I say this? Now, without the capacity to use data and analyze data, data is going to sit there or worse. So as Commissioner Dr. Stella Kyriakides said earlier this year, we have to combine priorities across governance, quality data, investments in infrastructure, and capacity building. So don't think of data alone, think of the related capacity and the related infrastructure. Second, these collaborators should remain open to non-EU researchers, particularly from developing countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. You know, I heard the references earlier in the panel about the geopolitics of it. Asia is not China. So Asia is also Indonesia, India, where, you know, you have 220 million people enrolled in a health insurance scheme in Indonesia, for example. So engaging those geographies on use, collaborative use, also helps advance the EU's values and governance mechanisms into these kind of like-minded countries who share similar values. And then I think within the regulation, we should make it easier for DAOs, the data altruism organizations, to be established in Europe. So Europe should be the preferred place for DAOs to be set up. Infrastructure to be hosted here, capacity to be created here, talent to be attracted, just like the CERN did in the 1960s and built through a series of experiments, this ecosystem around civil nuclear research, which led to the World Wide Web, new diagnostic techniques, and so on. So Europe should make it attractive for this to happen. And last point that I want to make is that in addition to being useful for researchers and entrepreneurs, data should be beneficial for citizens and patients, so that they are fully engaged in the data economy of the future. Now, if you go to them when you have a problem, like, you know, you want to trace COVID-19 infections, you go to the citizen and try and engage them, then there is resistance, there is suspicion. But if you are engaged on a constant basis, then there is more participation in making data work for everyone. So it's not only the what and how of making data work, but it's also the who. So I'll thank you again to the organizers. Look forward to the questions and comments.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation, Dr. Gill. I would like now to move to Mr. Malo. Mr. Malo, what concrete challenge is holding Europe back, and how can it be solved? Do we need to improve data access to SMEs and startups? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you to the EPP and the members of the European Parliament for the invitation. And thank you for all of the wonderful speaks. So far, I've learned a lot. First of all, I am representing one of the SMEs here in Europe, and we're a fast-paced and fast-growing company. And right now, since 2016, we have scaled up to 60+ employees, and we have built an AI system that is helping medical professionals in saving lives. The way that we have done that is that this AI system is going in, listening in on the consultation between a patient and a medical professional. So when someone is calling into, for instance, a 112 line, an emergency medical service phone number, then our AI system is listening in and understanding what's being said and helping the decision maker in saving the life quicker and better, and giving the better service to the patient. Cordy has built a lot of different things throughout the COVID crisis as well, and we're on the eternal path of helping these services throughout Europe, and on expanding such that we can help more and more consultations throughout the service or the systems. What we see here from a European standard and from being a European company is that we're headquartered in Copenhagen, Denmark. Denmark is an immensely small country. We're 5.8 million people. I don't know the exact number here, but approximately 5.8 million people. But that is, and it fits an infinitesimal number when it comes to all of the citizens in Europe. What we can see from a standpoint from being here in Denmark is that Denmark is an extremely well-developed country with extremely good health data. So it's an immensely good test bed. And it also introduces us towards the rest of the European countries in the best possible way, because of the rest of Europe knowing that Denmark is has a very good healthcare system. On top of that, being a part of Europe, we have a very, very easy way getting into the other European countries. We get invited to an event like this. We get invited to other events similar to this in order to spread the mission of our company, and thereby we can spread our technology faster and better. From the beginning of our company's history, we thought globally. We also even thought beyond Europe. You can call us cocky, that might be, but we thought that since we are building AI technology, we are so reliant on the data and the quality of data. So we knew that we needed to run directly out to the customers that had the best data. So we went to Australia, we went to the US, we went to European countries and so on. And we onboarded the customers there at any cost in order to get to that data, in order to plant our flags, in order to show competitiveness to the Googles, the Amazons, and so on of the world. That has worked. And now we have a technology that is really difficult to compete with. When we look at the European landscape, we have had an easy time using some of the regulatory frameworks going out in the world. For instance, saying we are GDPR compliant. We are in Europe there with the strongest data regulations that is set place on earth, so you can rely on us, and you can even call our customers in Europe, and they can tell us how we are integrated and how we oblige to regulations. When that is also said, one of the things that we are halted within Europe, and these are some of the challenges that we are facing in Europe, is that it's still not a single market when we go to the different countries. The different customers, when going to France from Denmark or Germany from Denmark, they have a different understanding of the regulations, and therefore we need to spend a lot of time on explaining it from our standpoint, from what we have learned from Denmark, and so on and so on. That is hurting innovation, and that is hurting the pace. We're working every day on this. But what we also see is that the European Union are working on making more regulations. And some of these regulations is difficult for us to understand sometimes. And it's difficult for our customers or customers to understand. For instance, the AI regulations. I am also an associate professor on the side and have a PhD in machine learning. And I have a very, very difficult time understanding what is meant by AI. I don't even like the connotation of it, artificial intelligence. No scientist with respect for himself or herself can actually explain exactly what that is. So starting to make regulation about something that we have such a hard time defining is really dangerous. And that is hurting, again, innovation, because it puts question marks and it creates fear. Instead of actually looking at a system like ours that can save lives, if brought out there as quickly as possible across the union, then suddenly we are met in some instances, not all, by fear. And that was my timer on the 5 minutes. So I have 2 minutes left, and that I would love to conclude and then
go ahead. Go ahead, please.
So yes. So in conclusion, being a European company and using the European market has been extremely beneficial to us. What we see is that we have a challenge in continuing to make regulations that are still poorly defined and making it difficult for us to grasp and getting the transparency on how to maneuver it such that we can get out to the customers as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malo, and thank you for being so serious with the time. And also, Dr. Siegel was very on time with his explanation. It was very interesting. So now we turn. It's the turn of for Mrs. Garcia Robles. Mrs. Garcia Robles, what are the main challenges for Europe to fully benefit from the opportunities of data-driven innovation? How can we deal with it? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, first for your invitation to be here, in particular to MEP Dr. Christian Ehler. Thank you very much. So I'm here also representing a large European industry-driven research and innovation ecosystem. So my answer will come very much from the research and innovation perspective. And we look at data value and industrial AI. And we look at it by promoting cooperation in a pro-competitive environment. So industry that competes in the market collaborates in research and innovation, collaborative research and innovation, and we manage to bring together data owners, technology producers, and users of the technology in different sectors to actually land and before things go into the market, before the technology is there. We are over 220 organizations over Europe, and I think we are also kind of known maybe by some of you because we've been a counterpart of the European Commission in one of the partnerships in Horizon Europe, a big data value partnership. Our ecosystem actually is a result of it. We are very proud. And as is in our DNA to really cooperate with others, we are also cooperating with the EuroHPC joint undertaking and promoting upcoming partnerships as well as the AI, data and robotics. So, well, I want to talking about challenges and solutions. So, I mean, and I will emphasize a lot the need of having these ecosystems, industry-driven research and innovation ecosystems. So one of the things that the community does is actually to develop these strategic research and innovation agendas that actually guide us into actions, collaborative research and innovation actions that are implemented by European players. Something that is new and very much aligned with the current focus is that we are integrating already, industry players are integrating in their agendas fundamental rights and values are part of these agendas. And also an important aspect that we need to emphasize is that we start incorporating deployment, because one of the challenges is the whole uptake. So we are developing or creating a lot of knowledge that is always challenging to take to the market. I will take very briefly about that later. Of course, we welcome very much the current focus on data, and we contribute to it as much as we can. One initial statement that I would like to do, also based on a vision that we released last year called European Governed Data Sharing Space. And when I say we, normally it's consensus-based documents released by the community. So we really see opportunities, these opportunities that artificial intelligence bring now as one of the primary drivers for the data economy. Interestingly, and this has been commented already, these opportunities cannot be fully exploited without this wider access to large volumes of high quality data. And here there are three messages that I bring. We are talking a lot about data sharing, it's bring a strong focus, but data sharing, data value and data quality, they come together. Data sharing without the possibility of creating value and creating fair data value chains, and without data quality, and I'm very happy that has been emphasized a lot, is not meaningful. I would like to move from here to one of the first points, and is the convergence that is needed. This was actually emphasized in our vision paper as one of the challenges that we need to tackle, convergence between regulation, so the regulatory policies, and research and innovation, and how to link this to the technology and data ecosystems with the intent of developing implementable strategies, frameworks, and technical solutions that can sustain ethical, open, and democratic European data economy. It has been slightly mentioned before. We really support very much, for instance, we gave our feedback to the Data Governance Act, and we support that there is a need of this legal framework, but we want to strengthen the importance of having this framework as flexible, as practical, as and really connected with this experimentation and innovation ecosystems. Also, we know that it's very important that we link all the players need to cooperate together. So we need to link these ecosystems to different other ecosystems. So I want to emphasize as a second point the importance of building cooperations, not only in between different European and national policymakers, industry research, that's what we are trying to do mainly in our partnerships, but also to build cooperation in between existing research and innovation ecosystems and other ecosystems. For instance, we are building now a strong collaboration with GaiaX. It has been mentioned several times before. I think this is very meaningful for two reasons. We want to bring data infrastructure and data value together. That is also very meaningful because we bring together research and innovation results into the market. So this kind of cooperation is really helpful for that. And I want to emphasize that we need to support this kind of horizontal cooperations. As a third point, I would like to also say that we need to look at an holistic perspective of the challenges and solutions. So regulation won't solve the challenges alone. As I said before, for the European data economy to really develop, We need to work with large volumes of cross-sectorial, unbiased, high quality and trustworthy data. The challenges are not mainly technical. There are technical challenges. We are a technical community, but we know most of the challenges come from organizational aspects. Processes has been mentioned in the previous panel. Also a lot of business and legal. And there is a need of really working together towards these concerns of loss of control, lack of trust, lack of foresight in not understanding the value of data and the potential of sharing, the lack of data valuation standards in marketplaces, etc., etc. So in this, we need this holistic perspective where we bring regulation together with the standards and interoperability. That's one of the major challenges at the moment. Semantics interoperability, for instance, is a great challenge for really building this functionable ecosystem. We also need to work in value for business, for society, and for people, and to really build, as I said before, a fair value chains. And this also brings a lot of challenges. Technical enablers, again, is our main point of work. And we identified a lot of challenges in the privacy preserving technologies, for instance. So there is a lot of advances in technology, but how we can enable that to be really affordable for SMEs so they can implement it and they can have this secure data and data quality aspects as well. But definitely there are challenges also in sensing and perception, knowledge and training, reasoning and decision making, etc., etc., etc. But important is challenges in skills, and challenges in experimentation and deployment, and how to integrate fundamental rights, principles, and values together. And with this, I finalize my intervention, emphasizing this holistic view on addressing the challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. García Robles. Muchas gracias, Ana. I will finally give the floor to Professor Dr. Isabel Huelpe. Professor Dr. Huelpe, what is Europe's competitive advantage on the global market when it comes to data-driven innovation, and how can we strengthen this? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to the EPP and the MEP. And I've brought something insightful and entertaining, hopefully. If you look back in history, we know that we live in very dynamic times. 90% of the Fortune 500 that existed in 1955 are not part of the Fortune 500 in 2020. So that means we are in an unprecedented time of change and of entrepreneurial opportunity, if you want. And if you look at how well do European companies perform in global competition, well, we see that China and the US have the most number of companies in the Fortune 500, and then there's Japan, and then there are very few European companies part of the Fortune 500. And I think one can ask the question, what is Europe's future? Will it be a future with highly innovative products, successful production, or will we more become a tourist attraction for the world? And if we look at the development in business, only in the past 13 years, since the introduction of these small things, broadband internet and a smartphone, the combination of these two small changes, technological changes, has led to the disruption of whole industries. So we have the largest taxi company owns no taxis, the largest accommodation provider owns no real estate, etc., etc. And all these successful new companies, they did not succeed because they had the best technology. They succeeded because they did one thing right, which is customer obsession. Digital transformation, in essence, is about customer obsession. And political innovation, and you will remember this maybe in 5 to 10 years, will be about citizen obsession once we see more competition coming up. So that means a huge change for European companies, because in the old world, 13 years ago, it was the old world, best engineering and technology innovation were decisive. Today, it's innovating around the customer. And what do you need to innovate around the customer? You need to obsess about them. And I thought, since we're using WebEx, I don't know if you know, Zoom was founded by an ex-employee of WebEx who thought that WebEx was just too painful to use. And he found so many flaws with WebEx that he founded Zoom and turned it into the highly successful company that it is. Share price is up over 300%. And you can see that with all of the digital stars, that the GAFAs, the Google, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Zooms, they not just perform well, they outperform their own industry. So look at what Amazon does. It outperforms all other retail companies in Europe and the US. And how does it do it? It does through customer obsession. And we are right now still talking about this era, even though this era is in the past, the era of networks and platforms. The next era is upon us, which is the era of decentralization, of the blockchain economy, where we will have a new internet that enables to transfer value, not just information. And that is a huge opportunity for Europe, because the internet of blockchain attacks all the intermediary companies, all the platform companies. So it's a huge chance for new intermediaries to emerge, or for all those companies that create and produce things to be in more direct contact with customers and citizens. It's also a chance for capitalism and the social market economy. If you read just this part of the sentence, in the future, you will walk into your coffee shop, you will buy a cup of coffee. You will not just buy the coffee, you will buy an ownership stake in that coffee shop. So that means extending financial inclusion and participation to many more citizens that we see today. So I would characterize the position of Europe today in here. We're in the sandwich, which is uncomfortable, between highly innovative nations and nations who are also very efficient. And the main challenge, I think, that we face today is that technology, changes so much faster than individuals, businesses, or public policy. So the big gap is between public policy and technology. I don't know why you put me back to the start. I'm very happy to start over again, but I think we better move on. And so I thought I'd share this tweet with you. It's Naval, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, who asked his followers, I wish my country was managed by. And you see, at least his followers, maybe not surprisingly, don't want tenured academics like myself. They would like successful entrepreneurs. And trust in business remains higher than trust in government in general. And I think we can all agree that Germany and Europe desperately needs more disruptive innovation. And I wanted to share with you an anecdote I encountered in 2019. So I asked Kai Fu Lee, what interests you about European startups? And I asked him, he said, nothing interests me about European startups. He said, 27 different laws, your taxes are twice as high, no thanks. And he walked away. But then he turned around and said to me, if you could please send me all abstracts from all master theses written by students at TUM in technology and science, that would interest me. You are so creative and inventive. You don't do much with it, of course, but we could. And that must ring a bell with you. It certainly rang a bell with me. So, we have great research, we have great education, we just need to use it. And the success factor of other countries, you can see here, Europe, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany, we are net exporters of talent to one nation, which is a net importer of talent, the United States. So that's something I think we should think about. And when I attended the South by Southwest conference in Texas, Austin, I was constantly asked that I'm from Munich University of Technology and we won the Hyperloop contest. And when are you going to build a Hyperloop transport system in Germany? And I did not dare saying what I really think, which is probably never. So I said something politically more correct. I said, soon, we'll build it very soon. And similarly, I photographed this rocket and they asked me, why are you photographing it? And I said, I want to send it to ESA Aerospace, which is an aerospace startup in Munich. And they said, you really know ESA Aerospace? They are so much better than Elon. When is Germany sending their rocket to the moon? And again, I said, soon. So, we have research, we know how to do education, but we need to do more with it. And I think the secret is to disrupt bureaucracy and have less regulation. The success in this building and in this building at MIT, the most fundamental startups and science advances happened. And the special thing was you didn't need to ask for permission. It was an area without regulation. It allowed bottom-up innovation to thrive. And so we need to think something similar. So I'm sorry if I'm sharing this, but I received it this morning. I've anonymized it. So, you know, someone sent me this email saying attached is an interesting draft on AU regulation in the EU. Regardless of our case, it seems if they want to slow down innovation again. So this is the conversation I think that's going on, that there's a perception of too many rules for creative and innovative endeavors. And most of us still work like this, you know, behind closed doors where it's harder to interact and see what other people are actually doing. And creativity and innovation doesn't happen where everything is regulated. It happens at the edge of chaos. And so we need more, you know, events that attract the creative crowd, the innovative crowd, such as, you know, hacking events. Here's Hacking MIT. And students do something creative and impactful, because that'll attract the most coveted class of our time, the creative class. And I'm sure you've heard of the studies by Richard Florida. When you bring together technology, which is just applied knowledge, talent, and an area of tolerance, you have creativity. And with creativity comes high economic prosperity. Thank you very much. And I look very forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Welpe. I didn't have done any comments to reactions to your interventions, just because I want to save time and I want to be on time finalizing this panel. So let's move to our Q&A section. But first, let me remind you that at the end of this section, I will ask you to give us in 30 seconds the headlines of your positions. Let me start with the Q&A with a general question for all of you, which is the following. We all know that new technologies do not work if we do not feed them with data. During the COVID pandemic, at first, we have no data, so this was difficult. As we collected more data, we were able to use new technologies to predict infection waves, find the best treatments, and finally have a vaccine. However, today I want to talk about another disease. I want to talk about one of the priorities of the EPP Group, and it is about the fight against cancer. We can call it a chronic pandemic. Before the COVID pandemic hit, we had a very promising milestones in the fight against cancer. And these were achieved, in my opinion, thanks to the sharing of data and the use of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, among others. My question to all of you is, how can the European Union leverage the potential of the use of data to keep progressing in the fight against cancer? Let me stop here. And first, before you answer me, I will give the floor to my colleague, Mrs. Carvalho, Maria Carvalho. She will give another question to you. Maria, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Fantastic interventions, fantastic speakers. I have one question, a general question. Many studies have identified two areas that we really need to invest in Europe in order to become what have been said just now, European high-tech mecca. One of them is we need to modernize infrastructures like high-performance computing, quantum computing. We really need to invest to modernize our infrastructures. And the second one is skills. It's true that we have fantastic researchers that flow out of Europe to go to other parts of the world, many US, but in general, we need to give more basic skills to our population and also to have a more quantity of engineers, data engineers, computer scientists, and in order to and then I fully agree with this idea of that we are in an era of decentralization and blockchain. But for that, we really need to have a lot of people with the understanding what are these technologies. So we need to have a strong emphasis also on the skills, a more generalized, more democratic way to the skills on these areas. So my question, do you agree with the question of the need for infrastructures and also on the skills? And thank you very much. And my last remark, I was very music to my ears, the question of the disruptive bureaucracy and less regulation. Of course, we are in the European Parliament, but myself, I really liked it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Who wants to start? Maybe we maintain the order. So maybe Dr. Gill.
Yes, I'll start with the last question first from the Honorable MEP. I think the point I made was data alone is not enough. You need to create the distributed infrastructure that goes with it and the skills. And this is where I see a big gap operating in Europe, trying to hire the top AI data science talent here in Europe. I see gaps there. And it's also the right cost. If you're not being able to use the infrastructure at the right cost, hire people at the right cost, there is going to be a drag on innovation. I think there is an opportunity to really build out this kind of a new generation of infrastructure that combines governance and the compute capacity and the data architectures in innovative ways. So this is the opportunity for Europe. The question on cancer, I think there is a lot of work going on. In particular, there is a collaborative in Canada that is pooling data together from patients for early diagnosis. Often it's a question of just diagnosing something a month before it is actually done, where data can play a big role. But we should remember that it's not only about data and digital, it is also about the analog side, the molecular science, the clinical science, the understanding of patients' conditions in palliative care and so on. So we need to bring these different disciplines together into new ways of collaborating around data. The one misconception we have is that somehow the GAFAs and their Asian counterparts are unbeatable. It's not true. The quality of data, small, high quality data sets curated across disciplines in an innovative way can really change the situation on the ground.
Thank you very much. Mr. Malo.
Yes, I'll do the exact same thing here with the strategy from Amandi. So let me try to revert on the infrastructure question. I think that is a general point that we need better infrastructure. We need better relations between databases. It becomes really boring, but we need to be able to cross-reference one data point inside of one database to another data point inside another database more easily. And that brings me to our biggest concern right now, and this is that is to bring the data into the cloud. We still see different places in Europe, going to the different European countries, where people are not knowledgeable of whether they can actually bring the data into the cloud. There's a lot of public media on that, and people are scared of bringing it into the cloud, and they see it as something different than having it inside a private cloud, which people always say. So I think that this is all more about also communicating what is okay in order to get the data up there, in order to get it accessible. Also getting it into infrastructures that can actually compute, because we have big data centers. They're private, but we just need to get the data in there. And then we could also think about public data centers. That's something that we at least would also love to look into. The other thing about research talent, I've been working a lot within research, and I've been a part of the cutting edge research within machine learning for a long period, and am still. And what we can see from the research institutions, also given my affiliations with the universities, is that they are working alone, and they are still working alone within the universities in the European entities, or in groups of 3 at a maximum. If you look at Google DeepMind, based in London, not a part of the European Union anymore, they have many researchers on every publications, and they're really banding together in order to be a group. So we don't have the Einsteins anymore. I'm sorry to say, the individual that can really change the world. We need to be groups to change the world together. And that is something I believe that we're missing at the European universities, and where the US universities are getting a grasp on that. When that is said, there is one initiative that is called the Pioneer Center, based actually in Denmark, that has just been agreed upon, which is something that I would recommend that people look into. That is a really interesting initiative down that road. Finally, towards the cancer, I'm definitely not a specialist within that, and therefore I cannot give an exact answer. But what I can say is that it's immensely important from the ones that are technology savvy here, that we don't oversell the technology. I can refer to one big company without saying the name that went out, I believe it was between 2010 to 12, saying that they would cure cancer in a couple of years, and we're still not there. That is dangerous. So we need to make sure that we actually commit to the right commitments that we can actually that we can hold true, and also from a European Union standard and politicians and so forth, that we can all look each other in the eyes those 5 years afterwards and saying we actually achieved our goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garcia Robles.
Yeah, so thank you for the questions. To answer the questions about the infrastructures and skills, the answer is yes to both. With the following remarks. So modernization of infrastructures, we need interoperability in between these infrastructures. We need to democratize access to the infrastructure, and this is very linked to also the skills, because in many cases, in particular, if we look at supercomputing and we look at the access of SMEs to these resources, we need to look into the skills as well. And I think we need to look at synergies in between the different programs that look at after the different infrastructures, because something that we need to look at is this digital continuum. For instance, when we look at these digital twins that now come in manufacturing, in earth, in many different domains, we really need to look from the cloud to the edge, and how we look, in a very smooth way among different technologies. So there is a lot to do, not only the investment in itself. In relation to the skills, fully agree as well, is a part of a core aspect of us. We think we cannot develop, the uptake is impossible without the skills. For that, something that we really promote a lot is the concept of the digital innovation hubs. Of course, education in general needs to integrate more aspects of data skills, and but in the digital innovation hubs in particular, we are now promoting a federation of data-driven innovation hubs, bringing together a lot of regional data experimentation facilities to bring skills to SMEs and traditional companies, really, that want to transform their businesses through learning how to really use cross-border data to modernize their businesses. So yes, and then to the question of the cancer, also I'm not a specialist on this, but I can say that something that can help. There are major projects going in research in big data and AI, very much linked with cancer. Some of them bringing deep learning technologies and HPC, for instance, or they're really looking at the problem of access to that data and how they decentralize, how to do federating learning, and to really support aspects of how to advance on this. I think a good idea would be to bring all these initiatives together and to extract from them all the knowledge that is being created to really help into your endeavor. And I think it's a very, very, very good thing that you're looking into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gracias, Ana. Professor Dr. Welpe, please go ahead.
The main success factor for businesses and I believe policies is to move away from one size fits all towards individual solutions that reach people when and where they need it. How are such solutions possible? Only with data. If it's not allowed to collect data and process it and apply it to solve whatever individual needs and problems customers or citizens have, we will always lose against institutions, countries, companies that can. Obviously, it's not in the interest of anyone to give away their data, which is then stored in some data silo somewhere. I don't think that's in anyone's interest. And again, I think with blockchain technology, there's a real big chance for Europe if we act on time, and we are losing time and time is running out, because blockchain enables something beautiful, which is pseudonymity. It enables me to share data with a company, yet retain control of what the company does with the data. I can decide if I want to give that data away so they can create an individual solution, or if I don't want that, I can rent out my health data, even my genetic data, to pharmaceutical companies to study cancer solutions, and they need data to study that. So for me, it all comes together in enabling a better way to deal with data. And I don't think we are doing a good job with it. I think we have deprived Europe and of any tools to enable knowledge workers, or the tools knowledge workers need that are in line with our regulations. They're not European, they don't exist. And the ones that are helpful, they're not European and they don't comply with our laws. And that is a big problem. And I think the solution should not be in regulation and not allowing this and not allowing that. It should be for Europe to empower itself and come up with innovation that does both, that enables individual solutions and data protection. And this is possible with blockchain technology. And the most strategic thing for Europe and its economies is to develop an operating system and the corresponding hardware and implement that as a global standard. Because without an operating system and the hardware to use it, no smartphones are produced in Europe anymore. But you need that, because then you can set the standards. Then you are at the pole position of customers and citizens. And without that, we will continue to lose share worldwide. Cloud share, European space is shrinking, as you know. So that would be my main point. European operating system and hardware that really works, that's developed by entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. Before we close it, I would like to give the floor back to which speaker to give us their headlines in 30 seconds. Let me invert the order in this part of the interventions. So you will start, if you don't mind, Professor Dr. Welpe. 30 seconds to give us your highlights.
I think my highlight is that we need an operating system and a hardware that enables, that empowers individuals and moves us away from one size fits all business policies and from one size fits all regulation, because people are different. The same law may not fit everyone. So it should be enabled to opt out of data protection. So I often feel like I want the service. I don't want to be protected. I now really want to use the service. And in that sense, maybe as a food for thought for the weekend upcoming, the book Sovereign Individual, it was written in 1997 and so far has accurately predicted everything that has happened economically. And the last chapter is still in the future. And the last chapter predicts that countries in the future will have to compete for their citizens in the same way that companies have to compete for their customers. And I have to admit, I am looking forward to that day.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garcia Robles. 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I think for me, takeaway is this need of connecting regulation with research and innovation. And it has been discussed not to regulate too early. And I think a way to really to support the market is come to close to the market pilots and to understand what is happening and really support with this kind of regulatory sandboxes flavor to do regulation together. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Malo, 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. So I think my main message from this great event is to ensure that regulations make sense. Don't make regulations just to make those regulations, make them on definitions that are understood, and then make them transparent such that people can act upon it and test it. Make a good testing framework throughout the European Union that would make innovation and the work for SMEs growing to be big companies such that we can compete against the big companies on the West Coast in the US much easier.
Thank you very much. And now, Dr. Gill, please, 30 seconds.
Make it easy for European researchers across disciplines to work with their counterparts from emerging geographies of innovation in Africa, Latin America, Southern Asia, and Southeast Asia, to truly address the global challenges of the future, from climate change to health, including cancer.
Thank you very much to all of you for sharing your expertise on the use of data and how can we leverage its potential in the European Union. We have taken note of everything you have shared with us. Your contributions are very important to our work in the European Parliament and in our EPP Group. We thank you very much for being here, presenting your points of view. Thank you very much to all of you. Now, I give the floor to my colleague, Eva Meidel, who will do the closing remark of this summit. Eva was the EPP rapporteur for the data strategy. Eva, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Pablo. First of all, I have to say that a big thanks goes to our colleagues who organized today's event, to Christian Ehler, to Axel Voss, to Andreas Schwab, to Pablo, and of course to our rapporteur on the DGA, Angelika Niebler. They were the brains behind the invitations that reached all of our distinguished speakers. And the reason why I want to thank them first is because I'm glad that the EPP organized this event, because it really shows that we are the leading force behind the digital processes in Europe, where you know, the ideas are born in a way. And now I want to thank the panelists because you were really inspiring. Some of you I meet for the first time, and with some, as I've said earlier, I've worked before. But hearing several ideas from all of you, I think it was very important to kind of set the picture of tomorrow, of the future, and not just to speak about the past or of today. So here are a few takeaways. And again, apologies because it was such a wide range discussion and so many ideas were shared. So I could by no means touch on every point, but just a few key points that we as policymakers could also take with us. First of all, Europe needs to set its own data policy among ourselves to create a more stable European market of data. When it comes to interoperability, when it comes to the usage and reusage of data, the data privacy and the security standards. I believe, and that was also mentioned, that this is what will lead to the famous EU autonomy, where we want to get. But we should not do that in a protectionist way or a way of isolation. But perhaps exactly just the opposite. We need to use the data as an opportunity to revitalize the dialogue with some of our key partners, such as the US, but not only. But speaking about the US, the partnership with the US is absolutely and fundamentally based on shared values. So we have to make sure that we should work on these shared policies on data. One thing I believe is very important, and it was mentioned that when we try to create the legislation frameworks, we need to find a balance between the different interests in the system, between the privacy, between the access to data, because it's extremely important for developing economies. It's extremely important for institutions and governments. And secondly, what's important for us as policymakers, we need to think about the sharing data as a process that is driven by the need, that it needs to create innovation, better competition, better services, and perhaps seeing it in this way, we would also lead to more innovation. And lastly, because the principles of education were mentioned also in this last panel, skills is a favorite topic of mine, but lately it has taken also center stage in the European Parliament in the various committees. I think we can achieve all those effects of data only if people actually better comprehend the technological advancements and also maybe have some sort of interest in the process of democratization of the digital and the technological revolutions. So I think this is how we will find the balance between interests, and this is how we can set the boundaries and at the same time motivate the purposeful share of data. So this would be some of the main takeaways. We'll have a more detailed report, but I think it was a good momentum also for us as MEPs and as a group to kind of set the scene on the topic and to position ourselves. So on behalf of the EPP Group, warm thank you for today's discussion.